Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful lunch. We are about to go into our policy briefing and advocacy training. I have a couple of room changes, so if you have your schedule, and Nix and everyone will get you to the right room. But if you want to put this down, please do that. So, we are going to do the policy, just so you understand, we are going to do the policy briefing in here and the HADA lobby training. And then the room with Alaska and Alabama and Colorado, all those states, you're going to go to Columbia, BC, where we just came from lunch for your breakouts, okay? So if you are from Alaska, Alabama, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Iowa, Kansas, Massachusetts, Maryland, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Washington, or Wisconsin, you are going to go to Columbia, BC after the HADA lobby training. Maybe even slightly more important is breakfast tomorrow. I know we're all going to be tired from dancing and everything, but breakfast tomorrow is also in Columbia, BC, where we just had lunch, okay? All right, so as you kind of heard this morning from Kara during the racial justice plenary, and now we're really affirming it, we Network are having a virtual lobby day on the Hill, May 17th and May 18th. Yes, right? This is our second virtual lobby day. We did one last year in May as well. We did it on the Equal Act. We had 120 people make 50 visits, and in the fall, the Equal Act passed the House. So we know how successful this can be. You will be meeting with your senators on 4 bills, some that were introduced earlier today during the racial justice plenary, and one you'll hear more. You're going to hear more about all of these in just a few moments. But, so the Equal Act, the First Step Implementation Act, this is the one that we didn't talk about this morning, Prohibiting Punishment of Acquitted Conduct Act, and then the COVID-19 Safer Detention. So, in a moment or two, you're going to hear from my wonderful colleague who you met yesterday, Minister Christian Watkins. He's going to really delve in a little deeper than what you heard from Kara this morning. Then my colleague Colin over here is going to give us how to have an effective lobby visit. And then that's when you're going to go into your breakout rooms with members of GM and members of our GR team. Lobby visit, you're going to have the leave behind, the talking points, the lobby visit planning sheet, and you're also going to have a sample email script of how to schedule a meeting. And every scheduler from every state that's represented in this room, you're going to have their email address and their phone number. That's power, my friends. So, without further ado, I am going to pass it over to my colleague, Minister Christian Watkins.
Good afternoon, everyone. We can do better than that. Good afternoon, everyone. Amen, amen. Now, we know that the greatest commandment is to love God with all of our being and to love our neighbors as ourselves, right? But how can we really love our neighbor if we don't know how to love ourselves? So if you would, as a moment to ground ourselves and to center ourselves in this work and in the education that we're about to receive today, go ahead and hug yourself. Tell yourself thank you for showing up. Thank you for speaking out. Thank you for being you. Now turn to your neighbor and share with your neighbors at your table, just for a couple of minutes, what has surprised you about this time together that we've spent, and what have you learned, or whatever you want to share with your neighbor. Just show your neighbor some love and just share for a couple of quick minutes. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to wrap up the conversation. All right, about five more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 1.5. Let's give yourselves a hand of gasp of praise. So I pray this time together will be fruitful and educational for you all. It was Glennon Doyle that said, "Find what breaks your heart, and that will be where your purpose lies." And we know that the criminal legal system here has broken a lot of hearts. And we know that the criminal legal system still breaks hearts, even within the room, just by virtue of the stories that we hear, the scenes that we see on TV, just the evidence that we see on social media and whatnot. But I pray that what we discuss here, and what you've learned through our time together will further empower and embolden you to continue the work that you've been called to do, because it is sacred work. Amen? Amen. All right. Well, going into this thing called policy, or lobbying rather, faith-based advocacy. Laura, my beloved leader of the government relations team, and one of my fiercest advocates, one of my fiercest personal advocates here since I moved here from Dallas, Texas, definitely gave me an education on lobbying, faith-based advocacy, and she introduced me to the 3P analysis: policy, process, and politics. But in our conversations, because we are faith-based advocates, we definitely have to include that 4th P, that prayer. And throughout this process, what I'm getting ready to walk you through is our 4P analysis. And so as people of faith, it is important for us to ground ourselves in prayer, and also to start out with prayer and to end with prayer, because as we know through the scriptures, whenever Christ prayed, he got off his knees and did something. So that is the prayer that we all sustain, that we all incorporate into our lives and incorporate into this work. So the policy. You all heard from me. I preached. Now it's time for me to just talk with y'all. And you all heard this morning about, the root causes of the criminal legal system, the root causes of what we've endured, what many people have endured, what many black and brown people still endure disproportionately. But we know that since Nixon's war on drugs and the 1994 crime bill that was introduced that was signed by President Clinton, and we know the history that led up to those moments, and the outcomes that we still experience today. They're devastating. I can quote to you the statistics and whatnot, and you all can do the research and find organizations that have done research, like the Vera Institute, like the Sentencing Project, Like many others, qualified colleagues or co-conspirators that we have here in DC that have done the research and that put it out there on a regular basis to elevate the need for the reforms that we're seeking. But we know that it's those harsh mandatory sentencing laws that focus on punishment rather than rehabilitation and redemption that's taken its toll on vulnerable communities, whether it be black and brown communities, whether it be rural communities, whether it be impoverished white communities in Appalachia. The Poor People's Campaign does a really good job of tying the loose ends together. Bishop William Barber preaches on it magnificently every time he approaches the microphone. Have you all heard him? Do you all follow him? So what are we to do about these horrible statistics? I'll just go through. We know that today almost half of the people in federal prison are incarcerated because of drug offenses. That's one of the things that leads us here today. That's one of the things that causes us to want to engage in the sentencing reform lobbying that you all are about to embark on. So we see further that the reasons behind the policy are those devastating statistics. I'd be able to bet you somebody here has a story from their community of an incarcerated person or an impacted person. Is there one willing to share? Just briefly. Is there one that does prison ministry? Or there one that has an incarcerated person in their family? Is there one willing to share? Come on. Come to the mic, Shakita.
Short, sorry. But no, I remember being as young as 3 years old because my father was sentenced to serve 9 years in prison. And that was majority of my childhood, leaving Detroit, Michigan, and spending at least 4 hours in the car just to go to Jackson, Michigan, just to be pat down by, the guards and having them check my diapers because, it was insane, but that was reality for me. And only being able to visit my father for just an hour. Mm-hmm. So doing all of those things and not being able to communicate with him, because when he called, he never had no money on his books because we're low income. So all of those disparities, I really didn't have a real relationship with my father. He wasn't able to see me graduate, or he wasn't able to be at my 5th grade graduation. He wasn't able to see me at my cheer competitions because of him being incarcerated.
Right. Thank you. Give her a hand clap of praise, y'all. In stories like those that are prevalent in our communities, if we dare to actually reach out and hear, not to proselytize, or to try to help them correct their issues, but just to commune with them, just to sojourn with them, and that emboldens our own advocacy, right? That informs our own advocacy. It was Angela Davis who said that jails and prisons are designed to break human beings, to convert the population into specimens in a zoo, obedient to our keepers, but dangerous to each other. We see that in community. We feel that. And if you don't, I dare you to go and check some stuff out. Go talk to somebody. But this informs the work that we're doing, the policies that we're trying to inspire to be enacted for radical change, right? I did it. I pressed the wrong button. There we go. So we know about the far-reaching consequences, as Shakita just elevated to us. We know about, the disparities that are prevalent in the communities that keep people locked in a cycle of wanting and a cycle of perpetual impoverishment. So as we carry those with us, we have the policy. We have the policies that we're going to elevate, that we're going to advocate, that we're going to lobby our congressional members, our senators for, in order for them to pass. One is the Equal Act, the eliminating a qualifiably unjust application of the law. And we see here some of the reasons behind the law, behind the policy. It eliminates the disparity in sentencing for cocaine offenses. We know that there is a difference in the way crack in the powder form versus the rock form are viewed and also treated by a criminal legal system, right? We know that me going to Jesuit College Prep in Dallas, we know that kids that do coke, the powder form, are slapped on the wrist, given second, third, fourth chances to thrive or to be, become whom they need to be, versus me being from South Dallas, being born and raised there, having had family locked into the criminal legal system because they had the rock version that is said by some of our congressional members, staffers, that said there's a difference in the impact of the high. There's a reason that there's disparity because of the way in which the rock form is more detrimental to a person than the powder form. It's the same drug, y'all. It baffles me today. Every time I hear a congressional staffer say that, I'm just like, wait, did you hear what you just said? But now it's time to actually make that a reality, make those realities known, as well as legislate the better that can come, right? So this bill also applies to pending cases and provides for retroactivity. That's one of the things that congressional leaders are scared of, that retroactivity. I hear that all the time. Because going forward might be fine. We can do that. But what about all the people that's locked in the system because of these disparaging laws that are already on the books? This presents an opportunity to do justice for those that have been locked into the system because of the war on drugs and give them a second chance. That's one of the reasons this bill, this piece of legislation is so important. And so it also appeals to sections of the Controlled Substance Act and the Controlled Substance Import and Export Act. It codifies the leveling of the playing field so that there can be justice moving forward. Another bill, First Step Implementation Act, bipartisan piece of legislation that was passed under the Trump administration. And it seems like those same bipartisan players don't want to play well in getting this bill passed. But it's already passed out of committee. This bill, First Step Implementation Act, allows courts to apply the First Step Implementation Act, the sentencing reform provisions, to reduce sentences imposed prior to the enactment of the First Step Act. It allows courts to sentence a lower mandatory minimum for nonviolent controlled substances. So, and it also allows courts to reduce sentences imposed on juvenile offenders. There have been many discussions about juvenile justice. We heard yesterday there were many questions about what do we do about the kids that's locked in the system. This is a chance to provide justice for them. It provides sealing and expungement of records of nonviolent offenses. Those same juveniles can be justly allowed to thrive and to become their best selves because their records are expunged over something minor, right? And it requires the Attorney General to establish procedures ensuring that only accurate criminal records are shared for employment purposes. Now, there's some things that employers don't need to know. And a criminal record might not be one of them, unless it has to do with financial fraud and whatnot, or a really violent crime. But even then, don't we find it necessary to apply grace at some point in time? These laws would actually provide an opportunity for those things to happen, for justice to be made possible. Another one, the prohibiting punishment of acquitted conduct. Basically, anything that I may have been accused of that has already been adjudicated in court and I'm found not guilty of cannot be held against me in a second offense. Make sense? That's the basis behind this piece of legislation. Again, and as you see at the bottom of these, I've also noted that the bills are awaiting bill introduction and floor vote. They've already passed out of committee, and we'll go through the process I don't have a schoolhouse rock presentation for you to let you know how bills work, how Congress works. And many of you all already know how Congress works, but these bills, these pieces of legislation have already passed out of committee. They've already been introduced in the House and the Senate, been passed by the House, introduced into the Senate, gone through the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they've already been passed out of committee. They're just awaiting for floor time. That's our job. That's our job, to call on our legislative officials, to call on our senators to say, hey, look, we know this bill, these reforms are on the table. What are you doing? Why aren't you moving? Why aren't you a co-sponsor? And we'll get into that. But I did receive a note from a Senate Judiciary staffer that says that this bill right here, COVID-19 Safer Detention Act, this allows for the compassionate release of some of our elders that are locked in the criminal legal system, that are locked in jail, in prison, in federal prison. We know that there's a high population of older persons in federal prison because they're serving excessively long sentences, most times due to the war on drugs. They've been in jail for so long that time has passed them by, their families have grown up and gone. I myself had a cousin in prison that was locked away for being an accessory to a murder. He didn't kill anybody. He just knew the one who did. And the ones who did flipped on him and said he was the one. He was locked in jail for about 30 years. I never did get the chance to know him until I was about, 32 years old? When he was fortunately released by one of President Obama's what do we call them? Exonerations. Yeah, one of his pardons. There you go. I'm sorry. But yeah, gratefully Obama had the heart to include him in the list of pardons, and he's living a thriving life now. But this bill right here, it gives our elders that are locked in the criminal legal system a chance, all because the pandemic happened. Do y'all know how many good things have actually come of the COVID pandemic? You know, we've been not just, I mourn the losses that we've all had, that we've all experienced, whether directly or indirectly. I mourn the loss of time and activity. However, we have been afforded the opportunity to learn so much during this pandemic, right? I bet some of y'all learned how to use computers more so than you did before. But at the same time, we've gotten a chance we've been afforded the opportunity to learn so much more than what we ever could have before, and we've also learned our own resiliency. Can we not afford that to our elders that are locked in prison? This is why these bills are necessary. Now, going back to the awaiting package bill introduction and floor vote time. Now, I explained to you all before that, these bills have already gone through the Senate Judiciary Committee and whatnot, and they're just awaiting their floor time. 3 of these bills, the COVID Safer Detention Act, the Prohibiting Punishment of Acquitted Conduct Act, and the First Step Implementation Act. Those 3 bills are expected to be packaged along with other reform bills and introduced to the Senate floor for consideration, for whole consideration. This is one of the things that I heard from one of the staffers, one of the judiciary staffers. They are working on a package of criminal justice reform bills with Senator Grassley's office. This person that I was emailing is a staffer of Senator Durbin. The core package will be those 3 bills I just named, and they're considering including a few other bills that have been reported and discharged from the Judiciary Committee and passed in the House, right? They have not finalized the exact plan for moving the bills forward after introduction. Though it is correct that these bills have already gone through committee process and would not need to go through it again as part of this package. They're in the process of finalizing the bill, the whole package. So we're anticipating that Senator Durbin and Senator Grassley and their co-conspirators are coming or are developing a package of sentencing reform bills, of criminal legal system reform bills. When else has this opportunity come around? We're at a pivotal point, y'all. We're at a good time. The time is now to get these bills across the finish line, especially while Democrats hold the majority in both houses. Can I get amen? Amen. I feel this is my amen corner, but I need to hear it from other places here. But yeah, I mean, especially for such a time as this, we've seen too much. The Black Lives Matter protests, all the information that we've seen come from the decades of injustice. It's time to move forward, not backwards. So you all's lobbying on these bills, as well as my admonition yesterday as far as the democracy update was concerned, where local elections matter, where I asked you all to make sure that you and your friends are getting involved in local elections. Yes, it all works together for the good of those that love the Lord and are called according to the purpose, who honor the calling. You all have been called. We all have been called. So, on to the second P, the politics, the nitty-gritty. The preference or the aspiration is that all bills be bipartisan and bicameral. Bipartisan meaning that both Democrats and Republicans and independents and hopefully another party sometime within our lifetime, I don't know, but as of right now, the Democrats and the Republicans and the independents get together and they all support legislation. Bicameral, both the House and Senate. It passes both houses. That's the aspiration. So the strategy is to have, if we go and speak to Durbin, say, hey, look, go get some of your counterparts on the other side of the aisle to co-sponsor this bill. If you talk to Grassley or whomever your senator is or whomever your member of the House of Representatives, ask them, make that an implicit ask in anything that you do. Don't just talk to your friends and allies on the same side of the aisle. Go talk to your counterparts on the other side of the aisle, because it takes a village to get things done, right? Just like it takes a village to raise a child. Haven't y'all heard that before? It takes everyone. It takes all kinds to get these bills passed. Not just to make concessions or what have you that appease the sensibilities, but to also make radical reforms that are necessary for our country to move forward equitably. And then so we have another political factor of incremental reform versus being soft on crime, or those other pieces of rhetoric that we hear as rebuttals to why change is impossible, why things have to take so long to change, and that kind of thing. So that's also a present reality, because a part of the rhetoric that we hear on the Hill is that, you know, this isn't the right time to pass those kind of reforms because we with the rising crime, with the rising violent crime that we're seeing across the country, we don't want to be seen as soft on crime. But are we really adequately addressing the reasons behind the crime to begin with? And we can walk and chew gum at the same time, so don't let that kind of rhetoric stop you from advocating for what is right. And then another factor that we have are the midterm elections and the voter concerns. We know that it's prime time. It come around summertime, June, July, August, we'll see politicians going to churches that you've never seen them in before since the last election. We've seen them walking the communities and whatnot, but they won't go to the impoverished ones unless they are really like in the trenches with the people who really need the reforms, right? This about that time that, you know, their voter concerns matter because they want to make sure they get reelected or they get elected for the first time for good or not so good reasons. But we've seen that among GOP voters, their concerns are thus. 58% immigration, build that wall. Southern border, 14% on the economy. We've seen the rhetoric, we've seen the news. Joe Biden's economy is failing. Why? Because it was set up to fail by the previous administration, but we don't want to go there. 4% on schools, public education, CRT, blah, 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 those kind of concerns. And 4% on crime, the rising crime. These are the concerns that you have to take into consideration when you go see your senators, when you go talk to them, because they will have talking points to pitch back to you. So it's all part of the preparation process, the politics. Going further, here's that graphic right there on how a bill works. Told you I didn't have a Schoolhouse Rock for you. Apologize for not being that entertaining. But we see that, the bills have to go through, its processes. It has to be introduced, and it has to be written, it has to be, vetted by lawyers and negotiated behind the scenes by their staffers and whatnot, just to make sure that the bills are written so that they are passable. They go around and they get the consensus and whatnot. They go through committee in order to be analyzed and questioned, and the hearings to be had and whatnot. And then they make their way around to being voted on or not being voted on. We know that during the Trump administration, Senator McConnell's desk became a bill graveyard, right? That's what we're trying to avoid moving forward. That's what we're trying to make sure it does not happen, because there were some pretty transformative bills that made its way to McConnell's desk but were never acted on because they could never get floor time. That floor time, that vote time, is prime real estate. And we've got to do our part to making sure that our senators and members of the House know that we're watching you. We know these pieces of legislation are on your purview. Get into it. Get it passed. Do something for the least of these. All right? So, the process, that third P. Process. So, the Equal Act. It was introduced in the House. It was passed in the Senate, or it was passed on to the Senate, First Judiciary Committee, and it currently stands at 21 Senate co-sponsors, 10 Democrats, and 11 Republicans. Bicameral, bipartisan. First Step Implementation Act, same thing. Introduced into the Senate, we love Dick Durbin. Currently at 9 co-sponsors in the Senate, 7 Democrats, 2 Republicans. Prohibiting punishment of acquitted conduct, introduced, thank you Dick Durbin. 9 co-sponsors, 5 Democrats, 4 Republicans. It's the COVID-19 Safer Detention Act, introduced once again. 2021 was a year of getting some bills in the hopper. Now it's time to get them to Joe Biden's desk. Currently, 8 co-sponsors, 3 Democrats, 5 Republicans. This is the work that we're doing. This is the work that we're asking you all to participate in order to get those done. Process challenges. Like I said before, there are different process challenges that we're experiencing. I did highlight the midterm elections and political influences, legislative calendar time, that vote time, that floor time is prime real estate. We have to overcome, or we're currently having to battle with, the currently prioritized legislation and issues. We know as we heard yesterday, Ukraine-Russia conflict has received more airtime than any other war in the world. And how many wars are going on in the world right now? It's not just one. We have the Competes Act, bringing jobs back home to America, making sure that Americans, no matter what color, no matter what status in life they are, have jobs. And they're not sent away out to foreign shores, along with the money that's being hidden, that impacts our taxes and whatnot. Come on, Laura. We have the COVID supplemental legislation, trying to get more money and more funding for COVID resources. Okay, we still have a pandemic running around, even though some folks want to deny it. That's also a current reality. And budget reconciliation, which was formerly known as the Build Back Better agenda. Still trying to get that passed with a lot of resistance, These are the realities that we're facing when we go into these offices, and our members of Congress have other priorities. These are the things that we have to research and overcome in conversation. And not to mention the holidays, recesses, and other unfortunate events. God forbid there be another school shooting where thoughts and prayers happen, but not enough is being done to overcome it. God forbid we have another war pop up in a major area that totally takes up more airtime and whatnot. Hopefully another legislator does not pass. But these are the realities of our political process that we have to move through, that we have to endure while seeking justice. So as part of the process, got to make those asks. When you all meet with your members, can't be timid. We can build the conversation. We can have a conversation with them. We can talk with them and find out what they know and let them know what we know. But we just can't talk at them and not ask anything of them. You all put them there. You pay their salaries. They represent you. So why not ask them to advocate or to legislate on behalf of you and those that you advocate for? Amen? So for these 3 pieces of legislation as well as the Equal Act, so 4 pieces in total, we're going to ask them to sign on as co-sponsors if they have not done so already. And if they have signed on, thank them for it. Thank them for doing the work. Invite their colleagues to become co-sponsors, their party colleagues as well as the ones on the other side. Ask them to ask for committee votes if they've been in committee, like the Equal Act is. Still stuck in committee, hasn't been given time to come out, haven't been given the opportunity to come out of committee yet because Grassley is still holding on to that one. Concessions are still being made, conversations are still being had at the staff level in order to make sure that the bill is its best version to be able to be passed. You know, concessions are still being made and what have you, but we've got to let Grassley know, hey, we know this piece of legislation in its truest form is a good piece of legislation. Don't water it down like other bills have been. Let's be about the business of liberation for those that need it. And then, most prominently, ask them to vote yes when the bill comes about. Is this helpful, y'all? So, before I go into questions, I want to go into that 4th P, that prayer. You know, like I said, we've got to, as people of faith, prayer is what anchors us, not only to God, but to each other. It offers us the opportunity to be able to dream and to work towards the manifestation of those dreams, to participate in our own liberation and the liberation of others, right? So if you would, please bow your heads in prayer. I want to read this reverse St. Francis prayer. Some of you may know the real version, but I want to read you a radical version. Lord God, make us channels of your disturbance. Where there is apathy, let us provoke. Where there is silence, may we be a voice. Where there is too much comfort and too little action, grant us disruption. Where there are doors closed and hearts locked, grant me the willingness to listen. When laws dictate and pain is overlooked, grant us the willingness to listen. When tradition speaks louder than need, grant us the willingness to listen. Disturb us, O Lord, teach us to be radical. Grant that we may seek rather to do justice than just to talk about it, to be with as well as for the poor, to love the unlovable as well as the lovely, to touch the passion of Jesus in the pain of those we meet, to accept responsibility to be church. Lord, make us channels of your disturbance. Amen. Now, time for questions. What you got? There's 2 microphones on each side of the room. If you have anything that myself or others, my esteemed colleagues, can answer, let's hear it. If you will. Do you need help getting up? Oh, okay. Because we can definitely bring the mic to you. Yes, ma'am.
Barbara Hazlett in Virginia. And, okay, I understand the first line of resource is your own individual senators. But once they've either signed on or pledged that they will vote for it, does it help at all to go either to the people on the Judiciary Committee, even if it's been voted out, or to Schumer and say we need it to come up to the floor for a vote? Does that help at all, or should we just wait until it shows up?
Well, you definitely don't want to stop in your advocacy. Thank you for your question. One of the things I would suggest is that once you talk to your senators or once you talk to your elected officials, you know, I would no doubt think that you have friends in other parts of the country, or there's another senator from your state that if you've not talked to both of them already, talk to the other one. Or you have friends in other parts of the country that may or may not be as civically engaged as you are. Have a conversation with those friends to see, hey, let's have a conversation with your elected, or this is what I did. Listen to what I did. You know, try to get them involved in the conversation to have other conversations with other members that have not signed on. And then once that ball gets rolling and whatnot, then go to the leadership and whatnot. You'll be seeing information from us. I send out voting recommendations. Network sends up voting recommendations to our members. We send out information to you all, letting you all know what we've done on your behalf. But at the same time, you can mirror those conversations with your members, especially like especially with the actions that we do. Numbers matter. So if we can all repeat the same things, when I send up a vote recommendation to the Hill saying, hey, look, these bills need to be passed, you all will get notification of it, you all can do the same thing too. And this thing called lobbying is all about building relationships, so you want to be in contact with them, whether on the district level or on your, here in DC, just to let them know, hey, I know who you are, I'm getting to know you, let's get to know each other so we can keep the momentum going. Does that answer your question? Kind of, sort of? Yeah. It's all about coalition building. There was one other question. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Corky Thompson. I'm from Aurora, Colorado, and this is not a question, but it's a comment and a thank you. I've been doing lobbying both virtually and physically on Capitol Hill for 5 years.
Bless you.
I have never seen that process in the terms of the challenges that our offices and the legislators are facing at the current time. And I think when we become impatient because we don't get responses,
Yeah.
that's an important thing to remember, to know exactly what else are they thinking about at this moment.
Bless you.
So thank you.
Thank you for your years of advocacy, and thank you for recognizing that. I mean, remember that you're definitely talking with people. Most times you won't ever get to the actual member. You'll be speaking with their staffers, and they have their own problems too. They have family issues. They have, work-life imbalance issues and stuff like that. So getting, really vigorously upset with them and challenging them just because you think they don't understand. Realize that you're dealing with a human being, not just the system itself, And come with a sense of compassion, but also the fierceness of a child. Ask those questions, and don't acquiesce to just the rhetoric that they give, but also realize, there's multiple factors at play. And again, this thing is about relationship building. Any other questions? Sure.
My name is Richard Perez. I'm from California.
Yes, sir.
And perhaps this is a ridiculous question, but let me remind everybody that we are the employers of these politicians, and we voted for them. And so we should implement a bill that if bills are ignored in their desk, that they shouldn't be paid for the time that it's been there. So no work, no pay.
I see a future legislator in the house, y'all. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm Tom Volkert from Philadelphia.
Hi, Tom.
Hi. And I was wondering if there are any financial information that would make these bills more acceptable to some of the more conservative fiscal people, like how much it costs to keep people in prison that really don't need to be there, and so forth. Do you have any of that information?
You know what? You must have been an ear hustler in a previous conversation or been mulling around in the back of my head, because I've been thinking of actually pulling that information together personally as well as for the organization. There are organizations that have done those financial impacts. I do have one. Hold on. Give me a quick second. I knew it was in here somewhere. And thank you for the reminder. Let's see. Lo and behold, Kara Gotch. I knew I had the email somewhere. There's a summary of the positive impacts on the Equal Act. One of the positive impacts of the Equal Act, the commission estimates that the Sentencing Commission has reported. The Sentencing Commission estimates that approximately 827 offenders each year would benefit from the Equal Act. The current average sentence for those offenders is 74 months. The estimated new sentence for those offenders would be 43 months, those that would be released because of the Equal Act. Another retroactive impact, approximately 7,784 offenders in Board of Prison custody would be eligible to seek a modification of their sentence based on the section of this bill, based on the sections of the Equal Act. The commission estimates that up to 7,600 offenders will receive a reduction in their sentence, and the current average sentence for those offenders that are incarcerated because of the equal impacts, because of the sentencing disparity between crack and powder, or powder and rock form of cocaine, is 173 months. The estimated new sentence for those offenders would be 100 months. So we see a reduction in the amount of incarcerated time, and that's a reduction in the amount of money that the prisons would have to pay to incarcerate or to keep them alive, pretty much. And also other factors included. Now, as far as the financial impact, as far as how much it costs to keep someone incarcerated, I don't have that statistic as of right now. It is available. Our partners over at the Sentencing Project, I'll be able to bet you they do have that information. Laura, can you think of any others that would possibly have that information?
Well, you're in coalition with some very conservative groups like the Coast Guard.
No.
And they are all about fiscal competition. So we can get those done.
Yeah. So we will get those information. We will get the information, and I will make it a personal effort to send it out. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I have a question, because my biggest concern now is that many of the issues especially with young black men, and happen way before they even reach the age that they start committing crimes or having problems, and we have never really addressed meeting the needs of these as they grow up, from elementary school to junior high to high school, and the stereotypes and some of the issues. We really do need to address that.
Yeah.
The whole issue around family, and to address that, because some people are even afraid of them when they're in elementary school.
Right.
So I just wonder, what do you think about some things that we can do to address those issues?
Well, thank you for that. And that is a lived reality, especially of mine, because I've been a big kid all my life. I'm still a big kid. Yeah, I've been on elevators and had purses clutched, walking down the street, and some people kind of move out of the way or kind of sidestep me just because they don't know what I'm going to do. I've been that kid in the hoodie that's been looked at kind of crazy. You know, God be blessed that I haven't lost my life beforehand. But as it pertains to funding community initiatives to make sure that impoverished communities have the resources that they need, there's been money pledged, but legislation not passed in the Build Back Better agenda, there was monies that were available for disenfranchised communities, but elements of that legislation were not passed bipartisanly because of bipartisan nature. Even within some of these bills that I just laid out before you, there's money available for reentry programs, for rehabilitation programs, and I fear that some of those line items may be on the chopping block just to appease the sensibilities of certain senators. In the First Step Implementation Act, there is a provision that would actually trigger the Second Chance Act that would provide federal dollars that is currently on the books and more to come that would financially support reentry programs on the local level. And there are local initiatives that are happening state by state in order to fund those kind of reentry programs, as well as the community programs that are necessary up front in order to make sure that kids don't get locked into the cycle of poverty, as well as the criminal legal system as well. It's a tangled web that we weave, that we're woven into, and we're stuck. There's many options available, but we just got to make sure that we keep electing, that we work to elect liberationists, those that are justice-minded, not just minded about their pocketbooks, on both sides of the aisle. It can happen. Once upon a time, we did have legislators that worked together from either side of the aisle, but as time has progressed and as misinformation has flooded our systems of information reception, whether it be social media, newsprint, what have you, airwaves, we've become more divided year after year. Now's the time to seal that divide, to create bridges over those divides, to have those courageous conversations, to make sure that we're calling people, as my godfather would say, calling each other by our right names, calling on our better angels, to create those bridges, to be about the minded work of community building, as opposed to just me and mine, and to hell with you and yours. Sorry for the bluntness, but you understand what I'm saying? There's opportunities that are out there. There have been opportunities created. We just got to lean into them and learn more about them that are available on the local, state, and federal level. Any other questions?
This is maybe more of a comment, but I think one of the more hidden agendas, like when you're talking about prison systems, is in local areas, it's employment opportunities, and communities that don't have other economic benefits, you have this other push-pull thing. So on the one hand, we're trying to eliminate prisons, but then you have that other pushback about employment and other things that, people look at it in this other way. And I think that's one of the issues that makes it so difficult when you're trying to work on these issues.
Yeah, it is. It is. We were having a conversation. I was having a conversation with some of my colleagues earlier about what do we do, I believe with Joan Neal. Yeah, me and Joan were talking. Great woman, great mind. She posed the question, what are we doing about the abolishment of prisons, right? I mean, we know from this morning and from our historical research and from what we've experienced that prisons were developed to, curtail growth of a certain segment of the population. But what are we going to do? What happens when that's abolished? What do we replace it with? Or what do we do in order to make sure that prisons are not necessary? That we can walk, like I said, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. It just takes time to imagine and to put those imaginations, put those Christian imaginations, I'm sure y'all have heard the term before, into practice in order to reform the systems to make sure that we don't repeat the sins of the past. It's an ongoing process. And I, for one, am grateful to be in the work with you all of hearing the stories of yesteryear, as well as dreaming big for tomorrow. Amen? Now I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Colin, to lead us through effective policy making, or policy visits, Hill visits.
Let's hear it again for Christian. That was awesome. And I know sitting for a long time isn't too good for us, so let's take a moment to just stand up real quick and just get a quick stretch in before we get into this next part about how to have an effective lobby visit. Get that lumbar support. All right, friends. Let's go ahead and get back settled in. All right. All right, everyone. I have about 25 minutes or so to help prep y'all for an effective lobby visit. So I want to get through this all together as we gather in. We've heard a little bit about the policy, the politics, the process, the 3 Ps, and of course the prayer in setting ourselves up for our lobby visits. And now we're going to dive into the specifics on what are the tools, the tactics, the strategies to have a lobby visit that is effective and that is fruitful as well. So to start off, hello everyone. My first time being on the big stage. Very happy to see you all. Thank you. So my name is Colin Martinez Longmore, the Grassroots Outreach and Education Specialist here. Very happy to see you all. And as I said before, so great to see you all outside of a Zoom square. It is beautiful to see so many faces and bodies here. But we're going to dive in real quick into what it takes to have and how to have an effective lobby visit. So we're going to cover some tactics that we normally use in our in-person visits, but also some for our virtual lobby visits. And just right off the top, I just do want to say, there might be a feeling that, hey, if you have to do it in person, that's the #1 way to go. But we know that whether it's in person or virtual, having constituents be in front of their members, their representatives, speaking from that place of faith, speaking on issues that they care about, is important no matter whether it's virtual or in person. So we're going to cover both of those and see what are the best tactics to do for each of them. Sounds good? Amen? All right. So to start off, we're going to be talking about your role as a constituent with the staffers that you're going to be meeting with, as well as the importance of having your faith, values, and aspects of storytelling that you can include into your lobby visit. And then we're going to go over the lobby visit order, along with a couple of pro tips that we've seen from different studies, like from the Congressional Management Foundation and things that they recommend for us, and from our own personal experience, and maybe from your all's experience, and then figure out what to do at the end as a follow-up. Now, before we start, though, is there anyone here that would be doing their very first lobby visit with us? Very first time? Any first-time lobby visit folks here? Let's get a round of applause for these folks. This is amazing. Yes, yes. Very cool. So whether it's your first time doing this, whether you're a seasoned lobbyist on this now, we're very excited to be able to practice and hone in on some of these so we can make sure that no matter who you're meeting with, whether your member is on board with what you're going to be sharing or you might get some pushback, that you feel as prepared and confident as possible bringing your story and your perspective into this. So who wants to read this for me? JK, I'm joking. This is a chart from the Congressional Management Foundation. They do amazing work on what are like the most effective strategies and tips for lobby visits, where they interview staffers on the Hill. This particular chart says that ask the staffers that if your member has not already arrived at a firm decision on a certain issue, how much influence might the following advocacy strategies have? And we see the light blue means some positive influence. The dark blue is a lot of positive influence. And when you start from the very bottom, the things that have the least amount of positive influence, that's something like a form email message. Something that you might click, it fills out all the information for you, it just adds in your name, your zip code, and it just sends out, right? For my younger folks, maybe you swipe up on an Instagram thing and it automatically has something and you send it out, right? Those are everywhere. We see that that has some influence to it. But as it continues to move up and hits those different strategies, the one that's at the very top that I want to highlight is that in-person issue visit from a constituent. That has a lot of positive influence. We can see the dark blue fills up the majority of that space. So whenever there is a member who maybe is at a crossroads, hasn't made a decision on this, being able to visit, having a visit from a constituent is a very key way to be able to sway someone to come to some type of action on that issue. And I want to note that this was done in 2015, so pre-pandemic times. But the most recent Congressional Management Foundation webinar that they had, they asked one of the staffers straight up, do you care if it's in-person or virtual? And they said, either one. We've had some powerful moments over Zoom. We've had some powerful moments in person. What's important is that if these constituents are coming in with passion, if they're sharing real stories and real impacts into the community and the district that these members are part of. So at the very top, we can see that being able to have those face-to-face visits, whether it's virtual or in person, have a lot of positive influence when someone has to make a decision. And you guys are in luck because you all are doing that very soon. So we want to talk a little bit about constituent power, the difference between a lobbyist and a constituent. We like to say this little kind of like riddle, right? Every constituent can be a lobbyist, but not every lobbyist can be a constituent. What do we mean by that, right? You are each a constituent of some member, unless you live here in DC and you don't have a senator, right? But the thing is that there are many times there are corporate lobbyists that are not necessarily from a given district or from a state. So while they may be coming with information of some report or some study that they have, and they might have certain information, they don't have localized and personalized information about how a specific issue or bill will affect a member's current reality and their constituents. That's the power that each of you all bring here. In terms of gathering and providing information, the lived experience that each of y'all bring as constituents is so powerful. They want to hear from you, and oftentimes, your stories is the type of information that they have the least on. They're probably flooded with facts and figures and new studies and new data, but what they don't have is the stories of the lived experience of how a certain bill will impact their community, their district, their state. That's what each of you are going to bring. At the end of this prep, it's not that you are going to become policy experts necessarily. You're going to become criminal legal systems reform experts. It's that you're going to bring the expertise of your lived experience in your community to your member, and that is gold, right? So know that that's the power that you bring and what you're going to be preparing for your visit. A little bit of background so we know who we're meeting with between our Hill staff and our in-district staff. When you meet with a staff here on the Hill, here in Washington, D.C., normally this staff that you meet with are people that specialize in specific few issues. There are folks who are specialists that have put a lot of time and energy into learning about specific issues. They're often experts in that field. And those are the folks that members have in their offices, whether it's on education, on housing, on criminal legal systems, et cetera. They often help author those pieces of legislation, so those are the people that you're going to be talking to. They're usually those policy strategists that have that bigger context view of the work that they're doing. But oftentimes they are not from the home district or even from the state of the member that they're working with. So if you're talking to someone from the Hill, they might not have that connection to back home, right? Something to keep in mind. They need to learn why the given legislation that you're advocating for is important to you and your community. So something to keep in mind whenever you're meeting with Hill staff. On the flip side, If you're meeting with in-district staff, these are people that usually are probably not the policy experts on a specific issue, but they're people that are in regular communication with DC and their Hill office, and they're oftentimes a lot more in touch from the community and from that community as well. These folks are key to building relationships with your senator or your representative. So having that in mind whenever you're having your meeting. Am I having a Hill visit with Hill staff? This is the approach you want to take, or am I meeting with our in-district staff, and is this an opportunity to build a relationship, right? There's no one magic lobby visit that's going to suddenly change someone's mind. It's an opportunity to build a relationship where the true power comes from. As we said, part of this preparation is to go over those 4 P analysis that we had, going over the policy and what that looks like, what is the need, what is the current status quo, and how will that legislation change the current issues. The process of where those pieces of legislation are, the politics, what are the things to keep in mind as we're pushing for an action on something, and of course keeping the prayer that is the part that sustains all of that work that we do in faith-based advocacy. We went over that just now, so we won't be diving into that. You'll also have that in the talking points and leave behind documents that you'll be using to prepare in your meetings as well, so something you'll be able to continue to practice. But have that to lay the groundwork before you go into your lobby visit. This chart basically expands on what I said earlier on the type of information that offices and staff are looking for and how often they receive it. So the light blue bars that we see there are how often staffers receive a certain kind of certain piece of information, and the dark blue is how much they want to receive that information, how much interest they have in receiving that. The one that I'm highlighting is at the very top, and again, this is a Congressional Management Foundation chart asking what is some information that you look for and how often do you receive it. At the very top, we see it says information about the impact of that a bill would have on a district or a state. So that localized, personalized information. How will this piece of legislation impact my district, impact my community, impact my state? That is a hot commodity, 91%. Everyone wants to see that. All staff wants to know how it's going to affect their members. 9%, that's how often they receive it, they say. They hardly receive this information. You all are sitting on that sweet spot right there where you're able to provide this information that they really, really want to know, but that they often do not receive. So again, it's not about becoming policy experts in the next few days. It's about tapping into the expertise of our lived experience of our communities and bringing that to our representatives. In your lobby visits, again, we're coming at this from this faith-based perspective. Using your faith in your lobby visit when you're speaking to your member should be considered a strength, right? The way we come about to viewing certain pieces of legislation, knowing that it's come from this deep-rooted place of faith, is something that is powerful when folks hear it, and they can oftentimes connect, especially if your member is a person of faith as well, especially if that person is Catholic, right? A very good way to be able to connect with them on a quick way with using few words. An important thing to note that not every member of your lobby team, whoever is going to be going with you on that lobby visit, has to be of the same faith, or even of any faith at all. I know we have some folks here that maybe are not Catholic, maybe are not fully religious. That is totally fine. One of the strengths of having a diverse ideological group that comes in to visit is that it shows us, like, you know, ecumenical, interreligious aspect to it, as saying that, yes, as people of faith, we believe in this wholeheartedly, but there's folks that don't share my same faith but also believe in this as well, right? So even if folks are not all of the same faith, there's a big strength in being able to lead with that as well. And finally, be authentic with your faith when you're sharing any stories, when you're sharing the impacts of those during your lobby visit. If you don't pray in tongues, please don't pray in tongues during your lobby visit. Maybe you don't pray in tongues at all, actually. Make sure that when you share, that place of sharing from your faith is authentic. It comes from your lived experience. As we mentioned earlier and in some of our other breakout sessions, lived realities are greater than ideas, right? And if we can tap into that place of where our faith has really been there for us, how we've seen it impact others in the context of this legislation, that could be very, very powerful. Storytelling. Powerful, powerful tool in your lobby visit. If you're able to talk about the real impacts of policies from your lived experience. Again, I'm going to repeat it. We're not here to be policy experts. We're here to share in the expertise of our experience. And sharing those stories are the quickest way. There's something about the human mind where we're just wired to hear and remember and click with stories, right? If you want to tell someone something and they remember it, you tell it to them in a story, and for some reason those things stick with us, right? So having stories prepared, having those in our back pocket are one of the most powerful tools that we can use as constituents when we have our lobby visits. This is a perspective that is new and vital to a senator's office. Again, these people are flooded, they're awash in data and facts and figures and information. They're doom scrolling all day. They have all the data that's coming to them. What they don't have are the stories of the folks, especially in those districts. And another cool thing about telling a story is that a member cannot argue with your story, right? We're in an era of alternative facts where someone can say, well, what's your source, or what's this source, X, Y, and Z. But sharing from your story is something that is non-negotiable. You say, hey, this is the perspective, this is the lived reality of what we're sharing. And there's some power to that and being able to share that and not have necessarily any pushback on that, right? If they're kind. All right, so preparing to lobby visit. We've already done some of this, so some of this is going to be kind of going over things we've already talked about. Think about why you're going to be in the room, in the Zoom room or the real room. This is the wrong one here. Disregard that second sentence. Why is sentencing reform important to you? We heard stories of folks. I think in our country, everyone has a story having to do with the criminal justice system, right? And keeping those things in mind when you prepare going into the room is so key because it gives us that why to go in. Make sure to research your member of Congress. You're going to have a lot of time to do this, but something to keep in mind. How long have they been there? Are they champions of this issue? Are they people who are maybe against it? Do they have an election coming up? There are a lot of things to keep in mind when you're going to meet with that member. Make sure to review the leave-behinds and talking points, which you all will have an opportunity to do as well. If you're in a group, it's always great to assign roles in the visit so that when you walk in, there's not that awkward moment of like, okay, who's going to start it, who's going to end it. Make sure you know who's going to kick things off, who's going to introduce us, who's going to bring a story, who's going to be the one to bring it back when the staffer starts babbling for too long. Make sure you have assigned roles in there so that everything flows very smoothly, which the staffers very much appreciate when groups come in prepared with assigned roles. Practice your talking points and prepare for a conversation. This is more than just an opportunity for us to come up and monologue. It is for a dialogue. We want to hear that back and forth to build that relationship. And finally, if you're doing this online, obviously just check your technology, internet connection, et cetera, to make sure that you're set for the visit. Maybe that means not being in your specific house if technology is an issue, but finding that place where that could be great, especially if it's a virtual lobby visit. A couple of specifics for the COVID era lobby tips, the new reality that we're living in. We have a lot of, over the past 2 years, most offices transitioned to doing all virtual visits, much like all of us transitioned to doing virtual everything, school, work, everything, right? One of the silver linings of that is that Zoom has allowed greater accessibility for constituents. Oftentimes, I've only been at Network for a short amount of time, but I've encountered so many folks that have said, I've never thought I could speak to one of my members. I never thought I'd be able to talk to someone who represents me, right? Because there's so many barriers to entry often that having Zoom really opens it up to folks. You can even Zoom with someone on your phone, which I wouldn't recommend, but it really opens that up. So use that as a strength to be able to bring faces that maybe normally wouldn't have been in the room and being able to place them in the room there. As you start, a great way to save time during virtual Zoom meetings is to just add everyone's name into a chat at the beginning. If you join us for any community conversations, we always do that at the beginning. Say your name, where you're coming in from. And that's a great way for everyone to introduce themselves without having to spend too much time going around, especially if you only have like 15 minutes to meet with that staffer, right? You can pack a Zoom room. So one of the benefits is that you don't have to worry about space if you're going to be in a hallway and you can't fit that many people or going through security on the hill. You can have a lot of people join in on that Zoom room. It could be great for support. If you jump into a Zoom room and you got 30 people, right? Just make sure to assign those specific folks that are going to be speaking, even if you have a big group and the rest could just be there for moral support and prayer. And then finally, don't miss the chance that whenever they ask, because it's going to come up inevitably, hey, how are you handling the pandemic, right? That's what we always ask each other. Hey, so how are things going? Don't miss the opportunity to answer that question within the policy context, right? Yeah, you want to build a relationship. You can tell them about your personal life, but you always want to connect that back to the ask that you have. All right, so you've prepared, you've gone over your talking points, your leave behinds, which I'll be doing soon. But once you're there and you're ready to go for the meeting, have a meeting with your team before the meeting is scheduled to happen. If that's in person, figure out a time somewhere where you can go over everything, you can simulate the conversation, figure out all the roles, see who has everything prepared. Again, the Hill staff loves it when a group comes in prepared with roles and people know kind of how things flow through. It makes things so much easier. If you're doing this virtually, I'd recommend making a separate Zoom call just for your team to be able to meet in before, maybe like an hour before or so, and then afterwards you jump off of that and you go on to the one that has been set up for the actual Zoom visits. You might be setting that up. The office might prefer to set that up depending on how they feel about the security of it, but most of the time we've seen that it's constituents that set up the Zoom call for them to jump on when they're doing it virtually. Make sure that you have your leave behinds and your talking points ready to go. You're going to have that document that after you finish your conversation, you can leave that. It makes the ask very clear and it goes over a summary of all the points. One thing that I've seen that some school groups have done really well is that they add little notes to it where they write just a message, hey, thank you for representing us, and then they sign their names or something. It's nice to add a little personal touch if you'd like, if you're able to do that in person. If it's over Zoom, making sure that you email those leave behinds or talking points. You can send those ahead of time as well, right? That helps to make for a more prepared and engaged meeting. When you're doing the meeting, make sure to silence all distractions. We all know this, phones off. If you're on your computer, make sure any notifications aren't buzzing up and clicking. We have plenty of pings and buzzes in our lives. We want to make sure to keep those out of the way so we can focus on that conversation. And then finally, at the very beginning, make sure to ask your staff for how much time there is. There might have been a set amount of time that you all agreed in when you scheduled the meeting, but things happen on the Hill, things might change. It's always good to check in at the beginning. Hey, I know we had a 20-minute session scheduled. Is that still good to go? They'll let you know. Actually, you might have to cut it short, or maybe they'll be like, you know what, something opened up. We can do 30 minutes, right? This is great. So always make sure to check in before just so that you all have an idea of how to shift whatever roles or schedules you had for that meeting. All right, here is what to expect during your lobby meeting order, and this can go in many different ways depending on the relationship you currently have with your representative. If you've done this multiple times, maybe you've seen it done a little bit differently, but if this is your first time doing it, this is a pretty good skeleton of what to expect during your lobby visit, whether it's virtual or in person. Starting off with that brief introduction, right? Again, assigning someone to do that is great. There's a lot of important policies to get into, asks to make, stories to tell. You don't want to waste a lot of that time on the introduction piece, right? Make sure to keep that succinct. Afterwards, let the member or staff know if you're a constituent, let them know where you're from, what city. Oftentimes you'll be able to make connections with folks that you didn't even know. Maybe you have someone working in their office that went to the same high school as you. It's a good way to make sure that you make that specific. And then as you start, you'll introduce the issues that you're lobbying on. You're going to talk about that policy, you're going to have your ask that you're making, and make sure to include that faith or moral component to it as well, where you came to that decision from that. And to also, very importantly, include a racial equity framework, right? To talk about that we're not just doing this for a specific reason, but to couch this in the language of racial equity, meaning that we don't just want this to benefit everyone the same way so nothing changes, but that we can really achieve some equity based off of what we're hoping to achieve there. After you present your points, it's your turn to then listen and to hear what the member or the staffer's position is. Once they share their, listen attentively. If you have someone that's assigned to be a note taker, have them take notes. Something I'd recommend too as well is have questions in mind before you go into the meeting so that when your member shares, you can then respond to that as well. Again, you'd like that to be as much of a dialogue as possible rather than just a monologue from your team there. During the meeting, some key things, be sure to ask for that staff member's email address to follow up afterwards if you want to send a follow-up of that leave behind or those talking points, or information maybe about something else that you have to share with them. Find out how you can support your member of Congress. Again, we don't want these to be like battles and contentious moments. What are some ways that you can help support your member? Find out maybe when they're going to be hosting a town hall or have an in-district recess so that you can open up new opportunities to make that ask not just during that visit, but maybe back at home as well, right? Really bug them. And and see if there's anything that the staff member needs besides the materials that we provide for a follow-up. If there's a story, if there's something that they ask that you don't know the answer to, and you're like, I'm not sure I can follow up with you, make sure you get those things after as well. A couple tips about tone when you're meeting with your member. Be sure to avoid direct antagonism in your criticism. As you're meeting, even if it's someone who is diametrically opposed with the position that you're trying to advocate for, you want to start off with something positive. It's not about attacking a person. It's about maybe saying how and being very clear and frank about how a piece of legislation, a policy, has real harmful effects. But it's not about antagonizing a person, right? So we can be clear about attacking a certain thing without attacking a person. Being polite or yet firm when explaining your position and your proposed solution. I love what was mentioned earlier. We are the people that hire we are the bosses for our members, and coming in there with that confidence of knowing that this is the people's house, right? And that we are sharing from that place of power in our democracy. Not being afraid to say, I don't know, or I can get back to you if they have a question that maybe we weren't prepared for. Again, all that does is just open up an opportunity to continue the conversation after the meeting. And make sure that your ask is clear, concise, and big. You gotta have a big ask. So what you need to do is have that be something that's repeated at the beginning, at the middle, at the end, and when you follow up with your leave behind, that's included there. You want to make sure that when you leave that meeting, they know what was the purpose of why you were there, right? Have that ask be very, very clear. After your meeting, some things we recommend: have some time to debrief with your group. What are some things that went well? What did we hear? What did we learn? Maybe you'll hear something in the conversation about a totally different policy. You'll start talking about the COVID-19 Safer Detention Act, and you'll learn something about their public health policy that you didn't know about, right? There's a lot of different things through those conversations that we can hear about. So set up a time beforehand that, okay, we're gonna debrief after this, whether it's in person or if it's virtually, setting up another Zoom call after the call to have that debrief time, sometime afterwards. But you wanna set that up so that you can have that time to really evaluate that process. Make sure to assign someone to send a thank you to that staffer within 24 hours of meeting, with those leave behinds attached as well. Even if you sent it before, you can always send those all the time just to make sure it's clear. Make sure to always include that policy ask. We want that to be front and center and very clear so that folks know what it is that we're asking for. And if you take any photos, let's say you're in person, you take a photo, maybe you're on Zoom and someone can screenshot everyone there. Share that photo on social media. The staffers would love to see that. We would love to see that. So if you do that, please tag Network. We have, I don't know if Audrey's here, but she's our social media wizard, and she'd love to see that as well. So please, if you share any of those photos, please be sure to tag us. And I know the offices will be happy to see that too. And finally, to make sure to fill out that the lobby report back form that we'll be providing as well. And that helps us keep tabs on everything that's going on as well to see how that process looks. So some things to keep in mind after the meeting as well. You will all get some time after this to be able to get in your groups, figure out what your game plan is going to be, figure out what type of research needs to be done a little bit more. But this will be all part of that process to hopefully have a fruitful and effective lobby visit altogether. We only have a few minutes left, so if there are no questions, okay, perfect. Yes, if you have any questions about any part of this lobby prep, you can do so in your small groups. But other than that, I'm very excited for you all to be able to advocate on this important topic, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
I see. No. Yes. All right, friends. We need to get out of this room because it's about to be turned into a gala ballroom. Woo! You, as Colin said, you are going into your breakout rooms now. California, Michigan, New York, Ohio, Virginia, and Texas are with Catherine Gillette in Columbia A. Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, and Pennsylvania are in Lexington, Bunker Hill with Sister Emily. And the rest of y'all are in Columbia, BC with Colin, myself, and Sister Eilish. Okay? So, see you there in a few minutes.